Welcome back to my channel for another video on the new Nikon Z9, and this video is all about a very small and compact, very capable but nevertheless very cheap lens for the Nikon Z System. I'm talking here about the Nikkor Z 28mm widest open f2.8, and this one here is also the special edition lens, which I will come back to in the course of the video. And this lens did surprise me in many ways. Lots of things to share. Let's get started. If you own the Nikon Z9, you spend a fortune to get it. And if you are planning to invest in that camera body, well, you're going to spend a fortune very soon. And the question is, if you want to slow down your investments and if you do not have already Nikkor Z lenses, what is a good lens to start with if you want to become a Nikon Z9 shooter? And this lens here, which I'm going to discuss in the course of the video, is the perfect candidate to start with on the Nikon Z9. And I will provide many reasons why I believe this is a very fair and very true statement. And as I said in the intro, this small, tiny little lens did impress me a lot during my shootings. Let's now quickly go through the specs of the lens, and let's start with the price. So the price of the lens, if you would order it in the US, for instance at B&H, is a little less than $300. And that's super cheap compared to most of the other Nikkor Z lenses you can purchase today in the market. The build quality of the lens is very good, and although it's a very cheap lens, it doesn't feel cheap at all. It actually feels very solid and very well made. And the focus ring is buttery smooth. If you listen for a moment, if you don't hear anything, that's because there is really nothing to hear here. The focus ring is super silent, and in particular videographers will appreciate that the focus is silent in autofocus mode, and in combination with the perfect autofocus system of the Z9, clearly is a bargain for videographers. The lens is also protected under nasty shooting conditions, so it offers a dust and drip resistant performance, and you can use this on rainy days, as the description by Nikon themselves says on their website. It's sealed against splash water and dust, and you don't have to worry about that lens, which again is a feature that you don't see that often in lenses which cost below $300. The focus mechanism built into that tiny compact lens is super responsive and works very well with the Z9, but also with the Z7 Mark II. And if you look here, if I focus now on the shutter button, it immediately turns into a green square, which signalizes that focus has been found. Or if I go here to the face of that model here, first of all, it's very sticky, which is due to the excellent tracking mechanism for focus in the Z9, but the lens reacts super responsive and is absolutely reliable. Let's take that shot here. Let's have a look how this looks like. Let's zoom in. Let's get this here centered. And you see this is a very sharp image, and by the way, also the background blurriness is quite pleasant in that image, and that's because we have a widest open aperture of f2.8, and that clearly is also not for granted for a lens with a price tag below $300. Clearly you could wish for a wider aperture. So for instance, in the Leica Q series, you have prime lens built into the camera body with f1.7, but f2.8 allows you nevertheless to play nicely with sharpness in the foreground and some blurriness in the background, as you just saw. Let's quickly cover the other specifications of the lens. We talked about aperture already. Widest open f2.8. If you want to stop it down, you can do so all the way to f16 for a wider depth of field, of course. It's calculated for full frame sensors, but can be used on crop sensors. In the Nikon system, they are called DX in contrast to FX, and F stands for full frame. And it has 9 lens elements in 8 groups and 2 aspherical elements, which again is not for granted for a lens as cheap as a little less than $300. You have a very spot-on autofocus system, as I just demonstrated, and it's based on a stepping motor, and it's also focusing inside the lens, so the lens tube is not coming out and going in again if you focus, which helps of course to keep this lens weather resistant. The filter size of the lens is 52mm, which means if you want to use a polar filter or simply a protector, it will not be super expensive to purchase one which matches the lens. And then there are two more data points which I typically provide when I look into lenses and their specifications. And that's the minimum focusing distance. The minimum focusing distance for that lens here is 19 centimeters, so 0.19 meter, which means you can get fairly close to your subject, and the maximum reproduction ratio or magnification ratio is 0.2 times. And let's quickly have a look how this plays out. For looking into close-up type shooting situations, let's use my model here again, which is that character from the TV sequel The Witcher. And let's see how this plays out with the focus system here. So let me touch. You see the eye is immediately detected and in focus. It is also very sticky. If I move now the camera towards my model here, all of a sudden it will become red. That means here is the borderline between still capable of focusing and no longer capable, which is exactly the 19 centimeter minimum focusing distance we have. Now let's focus this again. Let's see how close it gets. Let's take a shot. Quite nice, and let's have a look at that image. Here is the image I just shot at minimum focusing distance, and if I zoom in here for a moment and get this centered, you see this is sharp, crisp, looks very good, and again there is a pleasant background blurriness here coming from shooting at widest open f2.8. So quite nice, and you see how close I can get to my subject. And in this way also take photos, for instance, of butterflies, you know, bees, insects, flowers, what have you, in a macro type situation. I guess the images in that little slideshow already showed that the image quality you can achieve with that Nikkor Z lens, 28mm on the Nikon Z9 but also on the Nikon Z7 Mark II, is very, very good. And I wanted to make a few more remarks and collected a few more sample images here to actually make my points. First of all, it's a really sharp lens. And you see this here when I crop in to 100%. This is a 900 ISO shot widest open, and the focus is really sitting spot on, quite nice, and the sharpness is fully convincing. Same on the next image here. If you look at that, very sharp, very crisp, absolutely nothing to complain. Moving on to the next frame here, this is focus tracking at its best, and the Nikon Z9 has one of the best focus tracking systems in the world. And here my model was crossing the street and the focus is sitting where it's supposed to sit, namely exactly on the eye. And again, you have some pleasant background blurriness, and it's in this way creating a little bit of a three-dimensional appearance in the image. Quite nice. Then what I also tried, of course, is night photography. And I really like how these stars are presented here. So this is shot at an 8-second exposure, widest open, ISO of 400, and you see how nice pinpoint sharp stars we have here in the night sky. Quite nice. I like a lot what I'm seeing here. Here another photo from the night sky, and what you see here in front of you in the center of the frame is the Orion star constellation. And again, if I crop in here, this is a really good representation of the night sky, exactly in the way you want to have it. And I think astrophotographers will just love that tiny little 28mm lens because it is so capable on the Nikon Z9 but also on the Nikon Z7 Mark II for night sky photography. Here is a sample image where I pointed with my camera directly into the sunlight, and you see these nice sunbeams here on top of the trees. I think again speaks for a high quality when it comes to the optical properties of the lens. Here another example on a hazy shooting day, hiking somewhere on Lake Zurich on top of the hills, and you see the silhouette type trees, and I think the way this is rendered and represented here is very clean and is really impressing me given the price tag of this tiny little lens mounted on the Nikon Z9. And here another testimony for the sharpness and the level of details you get in images shot with the Nikon Z 28mm. It's just mind-blowing what you can achieve with this 160 gram lens here. And then the last image is this one. So I was segregating two series of images by just, in a sloppy way, holding my hand in front of the camera, and realized later that focus was actually sitting and that the image is really sharp. And maybe that's a good indication that macro type or close-up type shootings are absolutely no problem for the 28mm lens for the Nikon Z camera series. The lens comes in two versions. On the right hand side you see the standard version, and on the left hand side you see the special edition version, and that one was introduced when the Nikon ZFC was introduced to the market. And the price tag of the two, I just looked it up at B&H in the US, is absolutely the same. So for me it was clear I go for the special edition, and the difference really only concerns the design of the lens, not the optical properties, not what you get when you shoot it on a Nikon Z7 Mark II or the Nikon Z9. So it's really your choice and is a matter of taste. At the very end, it doesn't play a role whether you basically did bleed out because you invested almost all your money into a Nikon Z9 camera body and need to slow down on investments, or whether you are a passionate Nikon Z shooter and you're just looking for a small, compact, lightweight lens. This 28mm lens might be for you. It's very cheap. It has a very solid and well done build quality. It can cover a lot of shooting situations, landscape, people, street, close-up type situations like illustrated earlier in the video. And I think it's a very capable lens, and on top of it, it's weather protected and will not let you down even under nasty shooting circumstances. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel, there's always more to come. Thanks for watching, stay safe and healthy, and of course, peace out.